While researching mainly on civil wars, his work has appeared in the Journal of Politics, International Organization, Journal of Peace Research, Journal of Conflict Resolution, British Journal of Political Science, and a number of other journals. He's also written and edited several books. Karl received his BS and his Master's from LSU and his PhD from Texas A&M. He's a husband and a dad and a walking miracle.
Thanks, Dwight and Donnie. I want to talk today about some field work that my co-author and I, Sean Goldfinch, have been doing for a couple of years. In particular, some field work we did about almost 2 years ago in East Timor. And just a bit of background, this research was funded by the British Academy. We applied for a grant, we got a grant that paid for our airfare and hotel and everything, and some supplemental money from the New Zealand Royal Society. The purpose of the work is very specific. We're looking at state building and creation of a civil service in the aftermath of Civil War. So East Timor is it's a new country. It's very new. It's only 10 years old, and it's also went through about a generation of civil war. East Timor is a tiny country just north of Australia. So it takes up half of an island. That's why it's called East Timor. There's an East Timor, there's a West Timor. And it was a Portuguese colony for hundreds of years. So during that time, it became devoutly Catholic. And when the Portuguese had a coup in 1974, the new government of Portugal let go of all its colonies in Africa and Asia and other places. They were one of the last colonial powers to get out of the empire business. So the question was, as the Portuguese pulled out in '75, what would become of this little tiny area? There were freedom fighters in East Timor at the time who had been fighting against Portugal and had been getting ready to set up an independent nation. And in fact, they did declare independence in late November of '75, but on December 7th of '75, Indonesia invaded. And Indonesia is the country surrounding East Timor, and I have a map showing this. It's made up of thousands of different islands, and Timor was one of these islands. The invasion by Indonesia was no surprise to anyone. The United States knew it was coming. President Ford and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger knew. The Australians knew. Everyone knew. So you ask, well, why did the rest of the world let it happen? Just remember, in 1975, it was the Cold War was in effect, and some of the opposition leaders in East Timor were leftists and or Marxists. So there was a real fear that if Timor became independent, it would be a communist outpost right smack dab in the middle of Southeast Asia. A brief history, as I said, it's almost 100% Catholic, and it was very much an anomaly from 1975 until independence, because Indonesia, of course, is overwhelmingly Muslim. So there's a little pocket of Catholicism right in the middle of the most populous Muslim country on earth. I've got a picture here that I'll show if we get power back. The Indonesians built this huge statue of Jesus doing like this. And we visited that when we went, and it must be at least 100.
It's on? No.
Nope. It's probably at least 50 to 80 yards high, the statue. And it was an attempt by the Indonesians to placate the Catholics, to sort of say, look, we know you're different from us, but we can all get along. So it's a statue right at the harbor of the major city and capital of Jesus. And it didn't really work. The Timorese saw it as sort of a cynical attempt to placate them. It was also used up a lot of money. It was very expensive to build a statue. The statues are incredible. So as I said, there were three different rebel groups when the Portuguese were pulling out. And for about a 2-week period, there was an independent country of East Timor that no one really had time to recognize because the country was invaded.
It's on?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
I'll back up here. And here is, for perspective, here's Australia, and East Timor is just above Australia. So there's only 2 places to catch international flights in Indonesia. One is from Darwin, Australia, and the other one is from the island of Bali, which is somewhere in here, part of Indonesia. And then here's a close-up look of the island, and you can see East Timor, and this is also part of East Timor, even though it's in the western part of the island. It directly correlates where the Portuguese missionaries were active at the time. So, not surprisingly, Australia is a major player in anything to do with East Timor, as is Indonesia. And there's a lot of oil. There's a lot of oil and gas in the Timor Sea here. So that can't be ignored. Here's the big statue of Jesus, and I'm probably blocking some of you. That picture doesn't really do it justice, but it's on top of a small mountain facing out to the ocean. So if you come in by sea, you can see this huge statue. After Indonesia invaded in 1975, some of the opposition leaders took up arms to fight against Indonesian control. And they were vastly outnumbered from the beginning, and it only got more lopsided over time as Indonesia got a lot of military aid from other countries. And the Indonesians would bombard the interior where the rebels were hiding with ships out at sea. They would shoot heavy artillery. The leading rebel group was called Fretilin, and that's an acronym. Their armed wing was called Falantil, and these are the people that stuck it out throughout the whole 24 years of occupation. And they won the first election and had the first government in 2002. During this 24 years, from 75 to 99, in 99 there was a referendum and the people voted for independence. About a third of the Timorese died, directly or indirectly because of Indonesian rule. Through starvation, problems with the crops, and some of them were just shot and killed. For example, in 1991, the Santa Cruz Massacre, there were a lot of funeral mourners who were unarmed, as you would be at a funeral, who were just shot and killed. And this was one of the first events, probably the first event that called international attention, because people didn't really know what was going on here in this corner of the world. I mean, the Indonesians really kind of controlled who came and went to East Timor, but there was a British journalist who secretly recorded and took pictures of the Santa Cruz Massacre, and a Dutch woman snuck it out. She had it somewhere in her clothing. I forget where she put it, in her pants leg or something, and she barely made it onto the flight. They tried to keep her off the flight, and the Indonesians tried to stop her from getting on the plane, but she got on the plane, and the video was released. Here's another map, and this one just highlights Indonesia. The other map didn't really show where Indonesia was, but you can see it's a vast country. It's over 1,000 miles wide, and it's over 1,000 different islands. So here's East Timor, and culturally and ethnically, there's a big difference between the far west and the far east. This is Jakarta, the capital, and this is Aceh. If you remember the tsunami that hit in 2005, that was right off of Aceh, and there was another Sons of the Soil civil war there that lasted about a generation and has since been resolved. Also, the climate, the geography can be conducive to Sons of the Soil wars. And this is just a picture of the coastline. There aren't many trees in this part of the country, but you can still see it's rugged terrain. That's usually a rebel's friend if they can hide in the mountains and just come out to fight whenever it's to their advantage to carry out ambushes and things. Here's a picture, it's kind of grainy, of the Santa Cruz Massacre. And I tried to be careful and selective about the photographs, and I know some people might still be eating, but you can see this guy looks like he's shooting, and he's not really in an army uniform. He just looks like a hooligan. And in fact, that was one of the biggest problems throughout Indonesian rule and at the time of independence, was that the Indonesian military paid Timorese to form militias to rough people up who favored independence. This is the hotel we stayed in, and believe it or not, it's one of the nicest, if not the nicest hotel in East Timor. And it's a little deceptive because it looks kind of crude there, but this is the restaurant, which is on the second floor. And it was clean, it was basic, but it was right on the coast. This is one of the people we interviewed. This is a guy in the education ministry. That's the hotel, by the way. This is Sean and I with the New Zealand ambassador to East Timor at the New Zealand embassy, and he was very informative. He has a doctorate in history. So findings, we've got pages of notes, and we've got hours of tape recordings. We haven't really sat down to write the paper yet because I don't see them that often. My co-author lives in England, but lack of education and experience because of the exodus of the Indonesian civil servants is a big problem. There's a civil service commission, which is well designed and seems to be serious. They're making people take exams. They're doing a census of who is on the civil service payroll. It sounds like that would be obvious and easy, but it's not. Again, land ownership is very complicated, and in part that's because of the lack of a qualified civil service. The UN presence is overwhelming. We did sort of a little impromptu experiment over lunch. We were looking out over the ocean and one of the coastal roads, and we said, okay, we're going to wait 5 minutes and we're going to count every UN vehicle that passes. And we did it, and over half the vehicles that passed were UN vehicles. So why is this a problem? It's a problem because they need to let go at some point and let the locals take over the reins of government. Otherwise, the country just becomes sort of dependent on outsiders. And we heard this mentioned by some of the people we interviewed. And a competitive private enterprise network is really lacking. There's really not much in the way of private enterprise. So just sort of concluding, East Timor highlights the difficulties of transporting Western notions of rule of law, judicial independence, merit-based appointments, and norms of anti-corruption to environments where these have not been strongly held values. So they weren't really strongly held values when Indonesia controlled the country, and now having to create these concepts from scratch in one of the poorest countries on earth, it's really going to be difficult. That's all I have to say. If anyone has any questions, I don't know how we're doing on time.
What's the main source of income or revenue? Is it oil and gas exploration?
Oil and gas is just coming online. They signed a deal with a big Australian firm to develop the oil and gas, and they'll get most of the revenue. But they're even planning for beyond that, and that is one of the big hard currency engines.
Karl, is the church is an institution, one of the few institutions in the country then that's looked up to and supported by the people?
Yeah, I would say so. It's probably looked up to as much as the government. And the church has been protective of people in times of crisis. They'll take people in and protect them and guard them if someone's trying to kill them. And one of the crises, it might have been 2006, one of the priests went out and faced a group of hooligans just on his own, unarmed, and talked them down. We did write a report to the British Academy, but we haven't written a journal article or anything yet. We want to turn this into a journal article And we'll have to sit down, listen to we had the notes from the tape recorder transcribed. We just need to get together and look at them and work on an outline of the paper. And I'm going to see him at a conference at the end of the month and a conference next month. So we're going to work on it. Because we promised we'd do that, so we have to do it.
When was your trip, Carl?
End of 2010. I think it was November. It was November 2010. Yep.
This is amazing information. I never heard of this country, never heard anything about this. It really enlightened us quite a bit.
It's interesting.
Well, that's why the Santa Cruz Massacre and Bishop Bello are so important, because no one knew about this.
Carl, is any of the tension, particularly with the gangs related to Muslim versus Catholic issues or not?
It may have been in the past, but now the Muslim population is so small, just a few people who stayed over. I've never read anything about that.
But when they were the majority, I was wondering.
Not that I
were
heard.
Catholics persecuted or like?
I don't think Catholic. I mean, they're all Catholic, so.
No. But I mean, then the Muslims came in with the Indonesians.
I did not pick up on that in any of the interviews, or have not read that the gangs were tied into religious.
Because it is the biggest Muslim country in the world now.
Yeah.